Miss Ponselle, while we have you here, there's one question I'd like to ask you. Something that's been on my mind a long time. Why is it that with all your sumptuous tone and dramatic temperament, you never sang any of the big Puccini roles, like Tosca or The Girl of the Golden West or Turandot?
There wasn't time. The management was constantly taking old works off the shelf, like Verdi's Forza del Destino, Luisa Miller in Don Carlo, Spontini's La Vestale, and putting them on for the first time at the Metropolitan. Those were my assignments, the classical repertoire.
Operas that clearly called for bel canto singing. But didn't you ever ask for any role yourself?
Just one. Chile's Adriana Lecouvreur, a beautiful opera. I had studied it thoroughly. I thought it would be a good part for me and a successful production for the house. This was in 1936, 37. Then somebody came up with a box office report from 1908 when the work had last been done in New York with Caruso and Cavaliere, I think it was. For some reason, it had not been a financial success. So they refused me. This was one of the real disappointments of my career.
No artist is ever completely happy, Miss Ponselle, no matter how many triumphs she may have. That's in the nature of things.
Yes.
Besides, think of all the interesting operas you did sing. Oberon, Le Roi Dix, The Love of Three Kings, La Juive, L'Africana.
They were all a great challenge. But let's not forget the familiar operas like Traviata, Gioconda, and Don Giovanni. They thrilled me whenever I sang them.
Miss Ponselle, what would you say was the most difficult part you ever sang?
There were two, Norma and Gioconda.
And they couldn't be farther apart in style,
no.
Either musically or dramatically.
That's true. Gioconda's a savage part, full of violence, and Norma is classical. Norma feels emotion just as strongly as Gioconda, but you have to turn every phrase with elegance, no matter how dramatic. Then, too, the coloratura in Norma is formidable for any soprano with a big voice.
How long did it take you to master Norma?
Oh, to be exact, 2 years. When I first sang from the Metropolitan stage in an audition with Gatti Casazza, the general manager, and Caruso out front, I did the Casta Diva. And believe it or not, I fainted dead away right in the second part of the aria.
And yet it became one of your greatest roles.
Yes, I finally mastered Norma, but at what a price. Gatti Casazza and Tullio Serafin, the conductor, and my coach, Maestro Romani, would tell me to keep on singing these big arias as vocal exercises. They'd say, work on this opera musically. Maybe you'll do it 10 years from now. Then one day they broke the news. They were going to revive Norma the following season. That was in 1927, yes. I had mastered it vocally, but I assure you, the whole idea of this opera on stage made me tremble.
It must have. Quite a responsibility.
It wasn't only Norma that gave me that feeling of responsibility, Mr. Goldowski. Almost everything I did or had to sing had that same sense of urgency. That's why I envied the mezzo-sopranos. I used to stand in the wings and how I wanted to sing Amneris and Laura and Dalila. My voice was dark enough, in color, low enough in range, too. And I could have let myself go dramatically without worrying about the next high C coming up.
Do you mean to say you worried about high C's? It never sounded that way out front.
It didn't, because I worked hard. And I had a technique that always stood by me, thank God.
Your high C's in Norma and Gioconda were always perfect, Miss Ponselle.
Maybe they sounded that way, but they had become an obsession with me, too, in places. Every time I studied a new score, I'd look through it first to see how many high C's there were.
Incidentally, Miss Ponselle, weren't you the first American artist trained entirely in this country, engaged to sing major roles at the Metropolitan?
Well, I guess I was. I was given to believe that I was anyway. I'll never forget what Giulio Gatti Casazza, the venerable general manager, said to me just before I made my debut as Leonora in La Forza del Destino. Rosa, he said, if you make good, I will open the doors of the Metropolitan to all American singers. And it pleases me to think I helped pave the road for all the wonderful American artists who sing at the Metropolitan today.
But what about the famous European artists, your Metropolitan colleagues, Miss Ponselle? Did they take kindly to the American intruder?
Oh, bless their hearts. They certainly did. They were wonderful to me. As a matter of fact, it was the great Caruso himself who persuaded Gatti to hear me sing. And after my audition, he asked me to learn 2 arias. Pace Pace Mio Dio from La Forza del Destino, and Casta Diva from Norma, no less. And to come back as soon as I had learned them.
So you made your debut in La Forza del Destino
Yes.
with Caruso, De Luca, and Mardones on that memorable November 15, 1918. Yet, Miss Ponselle, it must have been an even greater thrill when you sang your first Norma 9 years later, the role you were determined not to sing.
I still get butterflies when I think of it. The sleepless nights that role cost me. To tell the truth, I was numb with fright. I wanted so very much to overcome its terrifying difficulties. Truly, Mr. Goldowski, this one role seems to encompass every anguish and emotion that any one woman is capable of. Religious devotion, amorous passion, friendship, mother love, filial love, each one expressed in jealous or cruel tirades of vindictive hatred, along with gestures of resignation and self-sacrifice.
Wouldn't you say, Miss Ponselle, that Norma is a victim of her own passions and temperament?
To me, Casta Diva is the most beautiful and sublime melody in all opera. Norma prays to the goddess of the moon, prays for peace. Then in the second act, we see her in an entirely different mood. Norma is revealed to us as a woman of great compassion. One of the temple priestesses, Adalgisa, confesses to Norma that she has betrayed her sacred trust as a priestess. She has fallen in love with a man and wants to go away with him. When Norma discovers that the man Adalgisa loves is Pollione, the father of her own 2 children, she becomes a raging tigress, screaming her jealousy, hurling every invective at Pollione for his betrayal of her and of the innocent Adalgisa. Now Norma must find another way of solving the problem of her children's future. She decides to entrust her children to Adalgisa and sacrifice her own life instead. Summoning everyone back to the temple, she pronounces her judgment. A new victim is to be offered for sacrifice. But it is not Adalgisa, as Pollione expects. It is Norma. Then, turning to Pollione, she tells him that despite everything, he will always be bound to her, even beyond the grave.
Do you think, Miss Ponselle, that Norma walks into the funeral pyre because it is what she must do in atonement for breaking her vows of a priestess, or because she cannot go on living without Pollione?
Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Goldowski. Maybe it's both. However, I really believe that her final gesture is not so much that of a Druid priestess as it is that of a woman.
How right you are. No other operatic heroine is so dynamic, magnificent, or blessed with so much beautiful music to sing as Norma.